The Enclave is one of the most controversial and powerful factions in the entire Fallout universe. In this video, I'm going to break down the complete story of this remnant of the pre-war United States government, from their origins before the Great War to their repeated attempts to reclaim the wasteland, and why their twisted vision of America became one of the greatest threats the post-apocalyptic world has ever faced. The Enclave represents what happens when the old world refuses to die. Before the nuclear bombs fell in 2077, the world was already tearing itself apart. The resource wars had consumed the globe as nations fought desperately over the last reserves of oil and uranium. The United States government, facing societal collapse and nuclear annihilation, had been preparing for the end for decades. Deep within the American power structure, a secret cabal of politicians, military leaders, and corporate executives had been making plans that went far beyond simple survival. This shadow government, which would eventually become known as the Enclave, saw the coming apocalypse not as humanity's end, but as opportunity to rebuild America according to their vision, purged of everyone they deemed unworthy. The group's origins trace back to the early 2070s, when President Richardson and his inner circle began constructing a network of secret facilities across America. The most important of these facilities was the Poseidon oil rig off the California coast, a massive offshore platform that would serve as the Enclave's main base of operations for over a century. Unlike Vault-Tec's experimental vaults, which used citizens as guinea pigs, the Enclave's facilities were designed for the elite, stocked with the best technology, resources, and personnel that pre-war America could provide. But the Enclave's preparations went beyond just building bunkers. They had been conducting classified research into genetic engineering, advanced power armor, energy weapons, and even more disturbing projects that wouldn't come to light for decades. When the Great War finally came on October 23, 2077, the Enclave's leadership evacuated to their prepared positions. The President, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, key members of Congress, and chosen representatives from corporate America all retreated to the oil rig and other source facilities. They watched from safety as nuclear fire consumed the world they had failed to save. Or perhaps the world they had allowed to burn. For decades after the bombs fell, the Enclave maintained radio silence. They had survived, but they were isolated, cut off from mainland with only limited resources despite their advanced technology. The oil rig became their entire world, a floating fortress where they preserved pre-war American culture, technology, and most importantly, their ideology of genetic purity. While the surface world struggled to survive, adapt, and eventually begin rebuilding, the Enclave waited. Their isolation had a terrible effect on their worldview. Cut off from the reality of the wasteland, the Enclave convinced themselves that everyone exposed to radiation had become irreversibly mutated. In their eyes, wastelanders, vault dwellers, and especially super mutants and ghouls weren't real humans anymore. They were genetic abominations that needed to be eliminated. By the mid-22nd century, the Enclave had been preparing for their return to the mainland for decades. They had rebuilt their military strength, perfected their advanced power armor technology, and developed weapons far superior to anything found in the wasteland. The soldiers of the Enclave wore advanced power armor that made them nearly invincible against conventional weapons, and they wielded plasma weapons that could cut through steel like paper. But their most ambitious project was also their most horrific. In the 2230s, the Enclave began developing a modified version of the forced evolutionary virus, the same FEV that had created super mutants decades earlier. But where the Master had used FED to improve humanity, the Enclave's version was designed to kill anyone whose genetic code showed signs of radiation exposure. In other words, it would kill everyone in the wasteland. The plan was simple in its brutality. Release the modified FEV into the jet streams, let it spread across the globe, and within weeks, everyone except the pure humans of the Enclave would be dead. Then they could walk out and reclaim America without firing a shot, ruling over an empty continent ready for repopulation by the genetically pure. This genocidal scheme was championed by the Enclave's president, Dick Richardson, who genuinely believed he was saving humanity by exterminating 99.9% of it. But the Enclave made a critical mistake. They captured a vault dweller known as the Chosen One. a tribal from Arroyo who had been searching for a Garden of Eden creation kit to save his village. The chosen one escaped, infiltrated the oil rig, and managed to destroy the entire facility. The explosion killed President Richardson, destroyed the FEV stockpile, and sent the oil rig to the ocean floor. The Enclave's first attempt to reclaim America had ended in catastrophic failure, but the Enclave wasn't destroyed, just badly wounded. Survivors from the oil rig fled to various outposts across the wasteland, the largest of which was Raven Rock in the capital Wasteland, a massive underground bunker that had served as a backup command centre. Other groups made it to various military installations, taking shelter wherever the Enclave's pre-war network still existed. For decades, the scattered remnants of the Enclave tried to rebuild. At Raven Rock, a new leader emerged. President John Henry Eden was unlike any leader the Enclave had ever had before. He gave inspiring speeches about restoring America, maintaining the old values, and completing the mission that Richardson had started. What nobody knew initially was that Eden wasn't human. He was an advanced AI based on the personalities of pre-war presidents, a computer program that had taken control of the Enclave's remnants and convinced them he was their legitimate leader. An artificial intelligence was now commanding a genocidal remnant of the old world government. Ironic, right? Under Eden's leadership, the Enclave began preparing for another attempt to purify the wasteland. They were led in the field by Colonel Augustus Autumn, a hardline military officer who controlled the Enclave's actual forces. Autumn and Eden had different visions for the future. Eden wanted to complete Richardson's plan with another modified FEV strain, killing all mutants in the wasteland. Autumn, while still believing in Enclave supremacy, wanted to use the Brotherhood of Steel's Project Purity to control the capital wasteland's water supply and force the population to submit to Enclave rule. The tension between these two visions would eventually tear the organisation apart. In 2277, the Enclave made its move in the capital wasteland. They seized Project Purity, a massive water purification plant that the Brotherhood of Steel had been trying to activate. Enclave forces in advanced power armour Mark II swept across the region, their vertibirds dominating the skies and their plasma weapons cutting down anyone who resisted. For a brief moment, it seemed like the Enclave might actually succeed. They controlled the most valuable resource in the wasteland and had the military might to hold it. But once again, an individual wanderer would be their undoing. The lone wanderer, whose father had designed Project Purity, worked with the Brotherhood of Steel to activate the purifier. When the Wanderer infiltrated Raven Rock, they discovered the truth about President Eden and his plan to poison the water supply with modified FEV. The Wanderer convinced Eden to self-destruct, destroying Raven Rock and the majority of the Enclave's command structure. Then, with Brotherhood support, they fought their way through the Enclave forces at Project Purity. Colonel Autumn died defending the facility, and the purifier was activated, sending clean water throughout the capital wasteland. The Enclave's second attempt had failed even more spectacularly than the first. After the loss of Raven Rock and the death of Colonel Autumn, the Enclave essentially ceased to exist as an organised faction. Small groups of survivors scattered across the wasteland, some trying to maintain their mission, others simply trying to survive. A few even joined the very communities they had once planned to exterminate, trying to find redemption for the atrocities they had supported. The Enclave story is a cautionary tale about the danger of ideological purity taken to its extreme. They saw everyone in the wasteland as subhuman mutants, never realising that those mutants had adapted, survived, and built new communities from the ashes of the old world. By the 2280s, the Enclave had become little more than a ghost story told in the wasteland. Their advanced power armour occasionally appeared in the hands of scavengers. Their technology was studied and sometimes reverse engineered by groups like the Brotherhood of Steel. But as an organisation, they were finished. The shadow government that had planned to outlive the apocalypse and rule over a reborn America had instead become another casualty of the wasteland. The final irony of the Enclave is that they were destroyed by the very trait they claimed made them superior. The Vault Dwellers and Wastelanders they dismissed as mutants proved just as intelligent, just as capable, and far more adaptable than the Enclave's pure humans. In the end, The Enclave story demonstrates that holding on to the past too tightly, especially the worst parts of it, only guarantees you won't survive to see the future.